everybody. I'm super excited to join you today and talk about one of my favorite topics, which is building buyer trust. So my name is Jen Davis. I am a MAPS coach. I'm also the vice president of MAPS coaching. Before that, though, I was a buyer's agent for our team starting in 2012. I joined KW, and over the course of my career, kind of built out this idea of a team within a team. And it was really, we hyper focused on the buy side, on my side of things. So I had showing agents, I had an executive assistant, and I also had some ISAs. So I have helped, I think, just over 2,000 buyers in the course of my career. My co-coach, Kari is not going to join us today. So for those of you that were really looking forward to seeing Kari, my apologies. She is on spring break with her twin girls and her husband. So she will be back with us next time. So I'm going to jump in. I would love to hear where everybody is from. So if you want to put in the chat where you're from, that way if someone's looking for a referral partner, we can start to kind of connect you within the chat. And then if you're in a space to have your camera on, I would love to see your beautiful shining faces. And if not, if you're traveling or driving, I absolutely understand it. So be safe. If you have questions and there is a content related question, please email myself or Kari, and those are our email addresses. If you have an administrative question, something around the recording or when our next session is going to be, please email fasttrack@kw.com. So we are going to jump in and talk about building buyer trust. So many of you know that this has been a big year for buyer's agents. There have been a lot of challenges in the market. We've had some lawsuits. We've had some verdicts that maybe didn't go our way. And I am not necessarily going to talk about that today. What I am going to talk about is how you become the best buyer agent that you can be so that no matter what happens in the market, your business and your future is decided by you. So one of the things that I look at with buyers is how was I able to help 225 buyers per year for several years in a row? My goal was always to be their fiduciary. My goal was not to be a functionary, right? My goal was to actually be an asset to them and to add value at every step of the way. So what I've done for everybody today is looked at the content and said, okay, where are the micro moments in the relationship with a buyer that we can hone our skills in building trust? Because I believe that trust is the foundation of any relationship, including working with buyers. And so when we can have a high level of trust and be a trusted resource for our clients, what ends up happening is, number one, we're able to help more clients, and the reviews and referrals that we get from those clients is better. So when I look at the first contact with a buyer, the very first time a buyer calls in and connects with me on the phone, or the very first time that maybe I get that web lead that's in, I'm looking to add value immediately. So when I look at adding value, it's not simply, I'm not the passer of information, right? I want to be an educator. I want to be someone that gets into partnership with the client. And so a lot of times people will say, well, Jen, how do you capture a lead? And when you're capturing a lead, how do you add value, or how do you build trust? And so one of the ways that we do it is a conversation framework that's called LP Mama. So many of you have been in the business a long time and you know what this stands for. Those of you that have not or are newer agents, the L is for location, the P is for price, the M is for motivation, the A is for agent, the second M is for mortgage, and the final A is setting the appointment. So what that sounds like is, if a call comes in, all I'm going to do is slow down the conversation with the client and get these pertinent bits of information from them. What location do they want to be? How long have they been looking? Is there a certain price range that they're looking within? What's their motivation? Motivation could also be timeline. By when do they want to be in the new house? Are they working with an agent? Have they been pre-approved? And can I set an appointment with them? All this does is it gives me a framework to remain in the moment with a potential client. If I am in the moment with them, then what I have the ability to do is offer value. If they don't know what they can afford, I can connect them with a valued resource like a lender. If they're working with an agent, I can redirect them to their agent or see if maybe there's something that's going on that maybe I can offer my assistance. If they're looking at timeline and they need to be into a home by a certain time frame, well, guess what? I can find them other properties to make sure that they have enough choices and inventory to get to the house that they want to get into in the time frame that works best for them. So when I follow this framework, I have the ability to connect with them. It allows me to be present in the moment, ask great questions, and then deliver value with information. So the next step when I look at micro moments with buyers is really during that qualification. So notice that the second M on LP Mama was actually mortgage. My first question to a new lead isn't, have they been pre-approved? What are they approved for? We may talk about price, but price would be, what are they comfortable with? What price range are they looking in? I've got to add enough value that I have the right to ask some personal questions. So when I look at qualifying a buyer, qualification comes with trust. So my first opportunity is determined by how well I show up in that first interaction and what value I can offer to them. So when I start to ask those personal questions, are they working with a lender? I'm not going to say, well, are you pre-approved for the price range we just connected about? I'm going to say, are you working with a local lender or have you just applied online? I'm not asking them to give me any additional information other than something that's an easy to answer question. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start unpeeling that onion and I'm going to start asking additional questions. And every bit along the way, I'm going to demonstrate it that I'm listening to them, that I hear them, and I'm offering value. I also want to build strategic partnerships. So strategic partnerships to me mean a lender that I can call to ask for help, a home inspector maybe that I can introduce someone to, maybe a credit repair person. Keep in mind that when I meet with a buyer for the first time, that trust is being established whether they're going to buy a home with me in the first 30 days or if it's going to take 18 months to 24 months for them to buy. So strategic partnerships may be someone like a credit repair person. It doesn't matter to me if a buyer can buy right now. I want to be their agent right now or in the future. So all I'm going to do is be an allied resource for them to get them to the point when they can purchase a house that they choose me as their agent. And I'm going to continue to follow through regardless of timeline. Follow through means I'm going to do what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do it, right? I'm going to under promise and over deliver. So I know that as agents that we are people pleasers, specifically buyer's agents, right? We've got the high I personality. We want people to know us. We want them to love us and we want them to trust us immediately. So sometimes that comes across like, yep, I can get you that information by 5 o'clock today. And what we haven't thought through is, well, we've got back-to-back showings or back-to-back buyer consults, or maybe we have an appraisal issue on another file. And so what happens is we don't deliver that information by 5. Instead, what I've learned is I have to understand my schedule for the day and then give them the timeline that I can actually hit. So I may say to someone, gosh, I can get you that information. I'm headed into an appointment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have the lender reach out to you, but I want to connect with them first. Would it be okay if they called you sometime before noon tomorrow? The goal then is for me to make that connection and have that person connect with them or me connect with them prior to noon the next day, right? If I can get that information then by 5 o'clock today, awesome. I beat my timeline by a long shot. But if I don't happen to get it until tomorrow morning, I've at least followed through and followed the timeline that I've offered. So when I look at the strategy session, one of the main points in a strategy session or in the buyer micro moments of helping a buyer is the strategy session. I will tell you, there are a lot of people that call this a buyer consultation or a buyer appointment. That's awesome. Call it what you want. Kari and I both refer to it as a strategy session because this is our opportunity to really lean in with a buyer and be strategic around how do we help them get into the best house at the best price in the time frame that works best for them. So when I show up to the strategy session, I am looking to build rapport. And the way that I'm doing that is not artificial. I am authentically me in the strategy session. But what I've learned is in order to build trust, that strategy session has to be about them and not about me. So what do I mean by that? When we're building rapport, the person that asks the questions controls the conversation. So my goal is to get the buyer to start talking, because the more they talk and the more they communicate, the more that strategy session becomes theirs. And when it becomes theirs, they feel super good about it, right? They feel like this person hears me, they want to work with me, and they're understanding how I want to move forward. So the way that I do that is when I ask great questions, I'm also listening for their response. And I'm asking an additional several questions around it. So when I look at a strategy session, let's say it takes an hour, I'm likely going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes on search criteria and 45 minutes or so on motivation and timeline. Here's why. When I understand the why behind the reason for them purchasing and the time frame that really matters to them, the criteria will fall in place. So what I've understood is there's this old saying that's buyers are liars. I would challenge that thinking. I think what happens is we get that buyer that says, well, I could live on a farm, or I could live in a condo, or I could be downtown, or I could be in outside of the city. And we're like, that doesn't even make any sense. That criteria doesn't line up. What it is we've actually just caught the buyer at the top of the lead flow funnel. So what Gary teaches us is a buyer is going to enter someone's search portal, right? An agent search portal about 18 to 24 months before they actually transact. So when I'm looking at motivation and timeline, all I'm trying to determine is this a top of the funnel lead, or are they about to transact? Doesn't matter to me which one. I'm still going to ask great questions. I'm still going to listen to them. I'm still going to put them on a follow-up plan. But what I'm not going to do is start showing them a bunch of properties that they're not prepared to buy because they're not actually ready. One of the questions that I will ask somebody is I'll say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I understand that you want to be in Springfield, Missouri in a home by the end of May. So what happens if we don't? What's your plan B? And the reason I ask that is not to create chaos with them or to create doubt. It's I actually want to listen to what their answer is. And I will tell you that the more detailed their plan B is, the more likely it's their plan A. There will be people that show up in your world that look like an A buyer. They look like they're ready, willing, and able to purchase right now. They want to go see houses. But when you ask that question about the plan B and they say, well, if I don't find something by May, that's okay because, I've got this month-to-month lease and my landlord is my dad and I can really stay as long as I want to. And I'm really just starting to look around. All of a sudden, we've got some warning flags that are coming up. It doesn't mean we're not going to help the buyer, but what it does mean is we're going to ask some additional questions. The more detailed their plan B is, the more likely it is their plan A. So all I'm doing in this space is I'm establishing their motivation, I'm establishing their timeline, and then I am going to clarify my communication plan with them. So I may say something like, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I want my motivation to match your motivation. And from what I'm hearing you say that you need to be in Springfield, settled into a house by the end of May. That really means that we need to be under contract on something really in the next 2 weeks. And so if we're looking at the next 2 weeks, that means that anytime a property really hits the market that is anywhere near your search criteria, I'm going to call you, I'm going to text you, I'm going to email you, I'm going to send smoke signals your way every time a property hits. If I see a look on their face like, holy smokes, Jen, that's too much communication for me, right? I can't handle that much communication. Then I may say to them, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I just want to make sure that I don't overwhelm you with my communication style. So I'm going to start to back off from there. Is it that they have to be in a house and they want that level of communication? Or are they going to say something like, you know what, whether it's May or June or July, I really just need to be in the house by September. Okay, That means that I'm only going to send you properties that really, really fit that criteria. Like we're not going to go into any gray areas because we've got plenty of time to identify that inventory. And so then we're going to talk about that communication. What I'm going to do from there is I'm going to set expectations. I'm going to set expectations around communication. I'm going to set expectations around showings. How many homes are we going to look at? When are we going to look at them? How do we communicate back and forth? Is it text or email or is it call? Most of that I'm going to let them guide. I'm going to adhere to what their communication form is. But what I have found is trust is broken in that gap between what expectation I set and what reality is. And so agents hear me, intentions don't count as reality. In our heads, we believe that we're going to deliver a certain level of value. We believe we're going to deliver a certain experience for a buyer. And our intentions are to do just that. But what I have found is my intentions don't actually always match the reality. And where I can break trust is when that reality and the expectations I've set, when there's a gap in it. So when you start to see that maybe you're not getting the buyers converted that you've been meeting with, or maybe you're not getting the reviews that you wanted to get, take a look at what expectations did we set? And then maybe where do we have an opportunity for improvement? This next kind of micro moment when I look at losing trust or building trust is demonstrating what I heard in the strategy session. So one of the ways that I did this is that I would look at when I set up a search, let's say I had a buyer that had some pretty specific criteria and some pretty specific ideas around layout of a house. One of the things that I wouldn't do is send them an automated search. So many of you are like, well, I can't manage non-automated searches. How am I going to have time for this? As a reminder, we were closing 225 buyers per year. So what we did is we set automated searches, but the alerts came to me. Because what I'm doing to develop trust is I want to show my buyer, not only do I know you, but I'm going to show you that I know you by only sending you houses that will work for you. So that automated search would come to me and it would say, here are these 3 properties for Alicia Smith. And I'd be like, okay, those 3. Well, that one is a Tudor style and these 2 are craftsmen. And she said she had to have craftsmen. So then I would text her the 2 that fit her criteria, dropping off the 3rd. What I was demonstrating was every time I sent her a house, it established that I had listened during the strategy session. What I might do in this period of time is some of you are like, Jen, there aren't 2 houses that fit. I'm still in a low inventory market. That's awesome. That's okay. I'm still going to demonstrate my value. I'm going to call the buyer and say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I have done a search through the MLS. There's really nothing there for you. I've also called around the 2 subdivisions that you said that you wanted to live in, just to see if there's anybody that's on the fence about purchasing. In the meantime, I've already set up a search with for sale by owners just to see what else I can get to pop up. So I just wanted to reach out and let you know that we're actively looking for your search. Is there anything in that criteria that maybe we could adjust to pull a few more homes in? That's a non-update update. I've actually told the buyer nothing. I actually don't have a house to show them. But what I've done is I've communicated my value. I've communicated what I'm doing in the background. I've communicated that I'm thinking about them, that I'm working for them. So they're not sitting at home like, maybe I'll just go to open houses this weekend. Maybe I'll just see if there's another agent that could help me. Maybe I'll get on this other agent's website. I am actively staying in front of them by saying, here's what I'm doing. All of you are doing those things for your buyers. We just sometimes fail to communicate it to them when we don't actually have something to show them. That's how we communicate our value. When we're reaching out to them and saying, here's what we're looking for, here's what we're doing, we've got to make sure that we're communicating it to them because they don't know what happens in the back end. And when we build value into a relationship, trust is automatically deepened. And then when we get into showings, so when I look at showings and I have had so many people say, I just want to get a showing agent. I just want to get to the point where I'm not showing houses anymore. I will tell you that the showing part of it outside of the strategy session is the number one tool for establishing trust and moving a buyer forward if you do it well. Showings are like the Super Bowl for buyer's agents, right? We walk in, we get to show houses, we get to get face to face with our clients, we get to build a deeper relationship. Gary talks about in your database, making sure that we go vertical in those relationships instead of horizontal. So my intention with a showing is to build trust, to build relationship, to get to know them better, to have some fun with them, right? So when I get to a showing, I'm continuing that strategy session. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, what did you like about this home? What did you not like? On a scale of 1 to 10, what worked for you? If it's anything above an 8, well, what does it take to make it a 10? If it's anything below a 7, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, let's regroup. I think when we did the strategy session, I think I missed an opportunity or I missed a few questions. This house at 123 Main Street was exactly what I was picturing that you guys were going to make a move on. And now that we're here and you don't want to, I feel like I've done a disservice to you. May I ask you a few more questions? Here's the thing. Buyer agents, I believe, are the kindest hearted agents that there are. And they want to help people and they're in the business to help people. But what happens is that we see showing additional houses like we're building friendships. And we can build friendships too. The challenge though is the more homes you show a buyer, the less likely they actually think you are to be the agent that finds them the house. So while we feel like we're being helpful by showing them extra houses, we actually need to be the professional and show them fewer houses. And we show them fewer houses by asking more questions. And so it's a constant regroup. Everywhere I'm at with a buyer, every conversation I'm in, I'm digging in, I'm asking more questions. Because remember, the person that asks the questions controls the conversation. It's their conversation, it's their house. We need to be present in the moment with them to help them make a decision. When I look at building buyer trust, I think one of the places that many of us automatically assume trust starts is in negotiation. And when I look at it, if I don't have trust by the time I've gotten to the negotiations, this is never going to work for me. I've got to be the trusted advisor by the time we walk in to making an offer on a property. Otherwise, they're likely not going to take my advice. So the way that I continue to build that trust is a reminder of what they wanted when they started. Buyers get cold feet. Those of you that have worked with a lot of buyers, and I see some familiar faces on here, we've all gotten to that point and they're ready to make the offer and all of a sudden they're like, I just want to sleep on it. And we could be funny and we could be cute and we could say something like, sleep on it, you won't sleep in it, or whatever that, line is that agents say. And I think the real opportunity for us as agents and as professionals is at that point to say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I completely understand getting nervous. It's a really big decision. When we started this, you said that you wanted to be in a craftsman style home. You wanted to be in the home no later than the end of May, and that this layout was really important to you. Have any of those things changed? I'm going to go back into their motivation. Why were they moving in the first place? Maybe their kids are starting school in the fall and they want summer in their new house so that their kids can make friends before they get on the school bus the first day. Whatever that is, I'm not saying it in a way to trick them. I'm saying it in a way of, hey, I remember what was important. And we've been in this partnership for this amount of time. Has something happened? Has something changed? Because sometimes they simply just get nervous. But I also can tell you, I've had the buyers that I didn't have that conversation with. They went to bed that night, they were ready to make an offer the next day, and the property was no longer there. And because I didn't ask the additional questions, I didn't give those reminders, they missed an opportunity on that house. And there was trust that was broken because I didn't ask one more time. We've got to make sure that the non-negotiables are met. Every time I've had a buyer that's had buyer's remorse, it's because the things that they told me in the strategy session, I didn't honor the fact that those were the non-negotiables. So school district, price point, certain features of a house. Once you're in the strategy session and you determine what are the wants and what are the needs and what are the non-negotiables, every time I'm getting ready to write an offer for a buyer, I go back and I say, hey, your non-negotiables were that you were going to be in Disney School District with a swimming pool and blah, blah, blah. Those are met. We've got the school district. We've got this. We've got the price point. Is there anything else that we're missing? Because what I have had happen with buyer's remorse is that we picked a different school district. They got the swimming pool, they got their price point. And all of a sudden, in that window of after they go under contract and before we do inspections, they panic because we didn't honor the non-negotiables. Communication is key. So when I look at communication, it's not simply a text message. It's not simply a phone call. It's not simply an email. It's all of those things. And it's identifying what certain words mean to people. So if I say that I want something that, I want a fair price. Well, fair price to me and fair price to a buyer may mean two totally different things. So when there are words that are common words, I want you to listen in and I want you to ask one more question. Okay, Miss Buyer, I completely understand that you want a fair price. Can you explain to me what fair means to you? I just want to make sure, right? Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to make an assumption over what a definition of a common word is, and that seems elementary to some of you. One of the things that I have found though is when someone says a deal, what's a deal mean? Right? A deal in this market is very different than a deal in the market when I started in real estate in 2008, right? Two very different meanings of the word. And then reminding us as agents that we are not the decision makers. We're the decision facilitators. We're here to help our buyers make the best decisions they possibly can with the information they have at hand. So I can't have an emotional tie to the outcome of this. I have to represent the buyer to the best of my ability. And what I can tell you is buyers know whether you're being authentic or not authentic. And so understanding that this isn't my decision, I can help facilitate it. I can give information. I can give my opinion if they ask for it. But if they've not asked for my opinion, all I really need to do is present the facts unless I think they're making a really horrible decision. And then I may be like, hey guys, I've got some warning flags coming up. But by that point, I've established enough trust with them to be able to have those conversations without it ruining the relationship. When I look at the contract to close, and I know that we're almost out of time, and you guys, if you need to jump off, you will get the recording of this. I have to meet all deadlines. I started the call with do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. So the deadlines on these types of things are very important. I want to make sure that I continue to communicate what the expectations are and what's going to happen. And I'm looking around the corners. They're paying me, right? I'm being paid to anticipate what could go wrong and help bulletproof the transaction. So one of the things in this space of the going under contract to close, here is where when I was, if I were to look at a gap in my business, this was typically it. I would get a buyer all the way to under contract and I would just assume it was going to close. And I would drop the ball here. And what I learned is I had to calendar communication with buyers that were under contract. I had to give them the same updates, right? Hey, here's what's going on. And what I found is when customer service went up and when my communication went up, my reviews and my referrals followed. Post-close. So the relationship's not done at closing. And this is something that I missed for many years in my career. We want to continue to add value. And I know most of you are adding them to a newsletter and you're adding them to client events and you're adding them to all these things. But one of the things that we have to continue to do is actually add value to them. Do they know what their property is worth a year from now? Do they know what it's worth 2 years from now? We want to plan for communication as long as you want the relationship to be. So if you only want the relationship to go out to their 1-year home anniversary, that's what your communication plan should be. If you want it to go out and so that their children and their grandchildren buy homes from you and from your team, then we have to plan for that communication. It's not simply just emailing them a newsletter with pumpkin pie recipes, right? It's actually quarterly calls of adding value to them. What do they need to know that you know? You're the expert, you're the professional, you're the person that can add value to them. Are pumpkin pie recipes nice? Yes, I love them. That's not adding value to me though. That's a touch, maybe not a touch that everybody wants. So understanding what that communication plan should be. I know we're at the top of time. I likely have some questions that are in the chat. In the event that I missed a question, please email me, jen.davis@kw.com. There was one question here that was, is this a recorded webinar? It is. You likely will get this recording sometime within the next 24 to 48 hours. And then Kari and I are launching April 11th. We also have 2 more webinars coming up that are at no cost, so be on the lookout for those. I very much appreciate each one of you for attending. Have an awesome day. I will talk to you all soon.